Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest installment of the Jungle War podcast here on the CLNS Media Network, powered by our good friends at Prize Picks. And back with me, as usual, it is Richard Skinner, Skinny from Local 12 and Local12.com. Skinny, we were going to maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, spend most of this podcast talking about what are the Bengals going to do on Thursday night at number 10 overall, and then what do they do on Friday and Saturday? Well, Thursday night's pretty much been taken out of the equation, we think, because they traded the number 10 draft pick overall, of course, on Saturday night, late Saturday night, to the New York Football Giants for the one and only Dexter Lawrence. Does he solve everything that is wrong with the Bengals defense?
No, but he does add an important piece for a lot of different reasons. And I think there's a lot of context to this whole thing. First and foremost, I think this trade is an indictment on recent drafts at the defensive tackle position, right? Like if you'd gotten McKinley Jackson right and Chris Jenkins right, if you'd gotten TJ Slayton right, you probably wouldn't be doing this. But you didn't. And you need a bona fide nose tackle. TJ Slayton didn't really fit the bill last year. He's probably going to get cut because of salary cap considerations. McKinley Jackson has been in the doghouse for a couple of years. So I think it is an indictment on those drafts because you would have liked to have kept the 10th pick in the draft. It's a premium pick. You got a guy at controllable cost for 5 years. But what he does do is he's a guy who constantly leads the league in being double-teamed. He provides pressure in the pocket. He's going to create one-on-ones for Boye Mafe. He's going to create one-on-ones for whatever tackle lines up next to him, B.J. Hill or Jonathan Allen or Chris Jenkins. He's going to create one-on-ones for Miles Murphy and for Shamar Stewart. He's going to help, in my opinion, take pressure off the two linebackers. Like, if as Al Golden said yesterday, you better put four hands on him, and what he means by that is you better have two different guys blocking him, double-teaming him. That's going to allow those linebackers to roam more freely and probably trigger quicker and not have to worry about second-level blocks coming their way. So I do think it was important. I think the other part to this, Mike, I'm going to guess is the Bengals kept mocking drafts and doing the process.
Yes. I was going to get to that.
Yeah, that it probably kept coming back to, well, Jermod McCoy's the guy on the board, and I don't know if they trust the medicals. We've been told a handful of teams have taken him off the board. We don't know if the Bengals are one of them. But based on this trade, it makes me think they probably did, right? So at that point, the 10th pick isn't as valuable as you thought it was or think it is or was going to be. And so instead, you get a bona fide Pro Bowl caliber player. And I'm going to give a detriment to this in a minute, but as we continue to talk. But yeah, on the surface, I didn't like it on Saturday night at the time, just popping off the top of my head. But the more the dust has settled, the more you've seen the finances of it, a reasonable extension that he probably won't even get in 2028.
Right.
I think it all makes more than good sense to have made this trade.
Well, and here's the thing. The point about mocking out the draft is, to me, everything about this deal. Because I have said several times, I know you've joined me in this thinking that the player that they get at number 10 or would have gotten at number 10 could not afford to be a developmental project, even for half a season. They needed that player to come in and be able to contribute right away. Dexter Lawrence fits that bill. And let's say 4 or 5 of the best players that were on the board, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, Caleb Downs,
Reuben Bain,
and in Reuben Bain, were all 5 of those players likely off the board before the Bengals at 10? Yeah, probably. Well, in that case, you don't want to be forced into taking a pick and trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You don't want to have to do that if you're the Bengals. And that's why I think this trade made all of the sense in the world, because they're getting a player there that is not only a starter in the National Football League, he's an elite player, arguably one of the 2 or 3 best defensive nose tackles in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and the praise from Al Golden and Zach Taylor yesterday was effusive. And Zach even said, I don't rate players, but I would go to bat or go to war, however you phrased it, to say he's the number one player at his position. And I don't think he says that lightly. I mean, a lot of times coaches won't roll guys under the bus, but they sometimes won't go above and beyond for that kind of praise. So I do think that they understand exactly what they're getting here with this guy. I guess my only negative would be, Mike, and I don't want this to come off as completely negative, because there are advanced analytics that showed last year that over the last 3 years that when he's not on the field for the New York Giants, in a lot of metric categories, they're either worst or next to worst in the NFL. When he's on the field, they're top 10 in some categories, or even at worst in the high teens in some categories. That's a pretty big difference that one player makes. Another stat that's out there, he's got over, I believe since 2022 was the data point. I'm pretty sure that's correct. Since 2022, somewhere in that vein, he has 110 quarterback pressures. You know the next highest nose tackle? It's Vita Vea with 32. You can use all these numbers. My only cause for pause is the following. He's got a lot of tread on the tires. He is in the prime of his career at age 28, going into 29 during the season. Last year, he had a career low in tackles. He had a career low in sacks. He had a career low in quarterback hits. And some of that would suggest, okay, man, is he starting to slip at this age and it's going to continue? Or, now I'm going to counter myself here too, or was this a guy that the Giants were going through a rebuild? He may have just checked out a little bit, not entirely, but just enough. And just in talking with him yesterday, you could sense his absolute excitement for now coming to a place where he has a chance to make an impact on a playoff team. And I do think that those career lows last year were more a product of him. Again, I don't want to use checking out. That's not fair. But I think you know where I'm going with that, of just a guy that kind of just didn't play maybe up to his standard because it just wasn't worth it, and now has a chance to do that in a new scenario, and I believe he will.
I believe he will too, and I asked Dexter Lawrence exactly that question yesterday, Skinny, at the press conference. I said, what about last year? What leads you to believe that you can get back to your form of 2 and 3 years ago? And he said, essentially, look, last year I didn't make the adjustments I needed to make. Now, why didn't he make those adjustments? Maybe there wasn't, like you say, the fire burning under the seat of his pants to kind of motivate him to make those adjustments, to feel a sense of urgency. And I'm going to use that term a lot during this podcast because and I wrote about this on CLNS To me, this whole deal is about the sense of urgency throughout the organization to get back to the Super Bowl, not to get to the AFC Championship. The Bengals are absolutely all in. Ownership should be absolutely commended for doing something they've never done, trading away a top 10 pick overall for another asset, in this particular case, a veteran defensive tackle. They have never done that, and I think I want to get into this a little bit, Skinny, the Joe Burrow impact. There are reports out there, I know Dan Patrick talked about this on his radio show, that, somebody in the Burrow camp leaked the fact that, maybe even Burrow himself, who knows, but somebody in the Burrow camp leaked the fact that he got across to the Bengals management before he left, you better fix the defense. And the or else to be understood there is I'm going to seek other opportunities for the back end of my career, and it won't be in Cincinnati. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I would find it fascinating to find out who got this across the finish line, right? Like, was this the coaching staff pushing more for this? Was this Duke maybe pushing for this? How much convincing did it take Mike Brown to give up that 10th pick in the draft? Because he loves his draft picks, right?
Right.
I think it is fascinating to find out who pushed this over the finish line. But, yeah, to the sense of urgency part, there's no doubt. I mean, you've probably got, in a best-case scenario, a 2 to 3 year window with the Joe T. Jamar in their prime, right? So that window, it could go to 4 years, maybe 5. But
I think 3 to 4. I mean, they're both still very young, and Burrow for a quarterback is still young at 29.
Yeah, no. So let's go with 3. It's not an indefinite window like it was. Like in 2021, it looked like this window was going to last as long as it wanted to last, right? And then it didn't. It dried up pretty quickly. So let's use 3 years. That goes pretty quick, and so the urgency is now. It is to win this year. It isn't to start building for next year. It's to build the pieces for this year. Have they done everything? No, but they weren't going to be able to do everything either, right? I mean, but they've done quite a lot. I mean, you went and got an edge with advanced metrics that pop off the charts to you. You got the best nose tackle in football. You got a very solid safety and a solid veteran to back up the safeties. And again, the Dexter Lawrence factor should help your linebackers. It's going to help all those other players. So, yeah, I think they fixed the defense. I don't think it's elite, but it's more than good enough now. It's not looking at what you had last year and going, TJ Slayton's one of the worst nose tackles in football from if you go with PFF grades. And Shamar Stewart was the worst edge, and the two linebackers were the worst. I think all those are going to be improved by more experience and by the fact of what Dexter Lawrence can bring up front.
I don't think there's any question about that. And I do think that Joe Burrow had some impact, whether it was direct or indirect. The idea that the Bengals are doing things that they haven't done before. We haven't talked about this, Skinny, in the last couple of years about things that the Bengals haven't done before. Probably going back to the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase contract extensions. They haven't not done that before. The way they handled Joe Burrow, they hadn't done before. But I think this way of roster building, there was so much clamoring for the Bengals to go out and do something bold, something aggressive, get a player in that was a game changer. And if Dexter Lawrence is healthy, he is absolutely a game changer.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. And you know, we can look at the earlier part of free agency with a cynical eye, and I do a little bit. Like, Brian Cook's not a game changer, but he's awful good, and he's certainly better than Geno Stone. Boye Mafe, you arguably overpaid for. We clamored for them to sign the linebacker. But look, overall, if now you take the body of work, I mean, Dexter Lawrence takes the body of work and pushes it over the top, Mike.
What I'd love to ask Duke Tobin right now is how much were the Bengals influenced by how the Seattle Seahawks built their defense?
I think 100%.
Because you got Boye Mafe, right, who was on the Seattle defense, and he is, by all measures, like you said, by metrics, an explosive playmaker off the edge. Will he be as productive as Trey Hendrickson? Time will tell. But Mafe was very, very good because, why, Skinny? You had defensive tackles and defensive line that complemented freed him up to do whatever he wanted. Well,
and he freed them up. I mean, he's the one that wreaked havoc in the backfield. Maybe he didn't get the sack, but you're forcing pressure up, right? Well, what teams would do with Trey Hendrickson, Trey Hendrickson would come around the edge, and all they do is step up in the pocket because there was no middle pocket presence. Now there should be middle pocket presence.
Absolutely. And I'm curious to get your take on, with Dexter Lawrence in the middle of the line, how does this impact Jonathan Allen, B.J. Hill, and Chris Jenkins? I am fascinated to see how that plays out if Dexter Lawrence can stay healthy, because now those guys don't have to be the guys. They can do what they were really drafted to do, and that is playmake as three-tech defensive tackles.
Yeah, I mean, Dexter Lawrence drew the most double teams in the NFL. Not surprising there. You know who drew the third most double teams in the NFL last year?
I don't.
Among interior players? B.J. Hill. Think about that for a minute. So
I am stunned by it. Well, you know what? Probably because if you took B.J. Hill out of the equation for the Bengals, they had nobody.
That's right. Correct. And so think about what that might mean for him. And listen, I can argue Jonathan Allen's getting long in the tooth, right? And his numbers have declined. But I could also say, the scheme wasn't a great scheme for him in Minnesota. It was really, it was a blitz-heavy scheme. And I don't know what he faced from a double-team perspective. But again, he's definitely going to get one-on-one matchups. And that's what you're creating here with Dexter. You're creating a bunch of one-on-ones. Now, you got to go win those one-on-ones. That doesn't guarantee, just because you got a one-on-one doesn't guarantee you're going to win those one-on-ones. But it does give you the opportunity to create the one-on-ones. And I'm fascinated to see the year that B.J. Hill and Jonathan Allen have. I'm with you. I don't know where Chris Jenkins factors into the mix. I mean, right now, if it was a game day, I don't even know if he dresses at the moment. But yeah, I mean, maybe this does do something for him too. Like you got one-on-one opportunities, kid. Go do what we brought you here to do. Go rush the passer.
Certainly, Al Golden can be more rotational at this point.
Absolutely.
He absolutely has more pieces on the chessboard, like he said yesterday in the press conference at Paycor.
Yeah, and back to your point about the kind of mimicking the Seattle model, let's not forget the Eagles model from the year before. I mean, they had two full rotational lines. I mean, they had guys coming in waves, and it was probably as much as Saquon Barkley was a strength, and Jalen Hurts creating stuff with his feet and all those things, and the tush push. That defensive line was what won them the Super Bowl.
No question about it. Speaking with Skinny, Richard Skinner of Local 12 and Local12.com. The playoff push is heating up in basketball, and there's no better way to cash in if you're right on the high-flying hoops action than Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Every bucket, every dime, every win means more when you're playing on Prize Picks. And with their brand new team picks markets, you can now pick game winners, spreads, and totals on top of the player picks you already know. So cash in if you're right during the clutch buckets, slam dunks, and Cinderellas this spring with team picks on Prize Picks. Pick the winner straight up on Prize Picks. Who is going to win the next big basketball game? Who's going to win the fight? Back your takes with real money. Download the Prize Picks app today and pick your first game winner, spread, or total as the playoff push rolls on. And get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks Predict is a registered FCM offering, and team picks and culture picks as event contracts. Trading involves significant risk, not for all. The content provided is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, a recommendation to trade any commodity interest, or an offer to open an account. CLNS Media and the Jungle Roar podcast are not registered with the CFTC or NFA. Prize Picks Predict does not endorse or guarantee any statements made by third-party promoters or influencers. Please consult with a qualified professional before making any trading decisions. Back with Richard Skinner of Local 12 and Local12.com. All right, we have pretty much flushed out Dexter Lawrence coming to the Cincinnati Bengals. Before I finish up on that subject, Zach Taylor and Al Golden and what they had to say yesterday, I found it very telling and fascinating that Zach Taylor says, we better go win now. How about you?
Yeah, because his job is on the line. I mean, he's got one more year on his contract. You can't, in the era of having a franchise quarterback and a top-tier quarterback, even though he's had some injury issues, you can't go a 4 straight year not making the playoffs. And it's not just not making the playoffs. I mean, it's time to make a push to the Super Bowl. I will say the AFC, and I think you'll agree with this, the AFC is extraordinarily competitive. There are a lot of I think it's the stronger of the two conferences, to be honest with you. So the path is never going to be easy with Lamar in it and Patrick Mahomes in it and Josh Allen in it, etc. And ascending teams like Denver and so forth. It's and New England and Drake May in that group. There's no question. This is an all-in season. It had to be. And to their credit, they've pushed their way into doing that. There are some depth questions we'll talk about when we start talking about the draft here in a minute. But overall, they've addressed a lot of things, and kudos to them for that, I guess.
All right, let's talk about the draft. It comes up Thursday night, begins Thursday night in Pittsburgh. The Bengals right now will be on the sidelines. They do not have the 10th pick overall. The Giants have the 5th overall pick and now the 10th overall pick. And we move into the second round, the 10th pick of the second round, and the Cincinnati Bengals should concentrate on what, Skinny?
I think 2 position groups, corner, because you definitely need it can be a developmental corner to some degree, but it also needs to be a corner that can give you some reps. And there's a couple of names I like. D'Angelo Pons, who's literally a Mike Hilton clone from Indiana, and right. Brandon Cisse from South Carolina. I think you have to, I think you got to get a corner, Mike, either in the 2nd or 3rd round. Maybe you could stretch it to the 4th, but let's not forget you don't have a 5th round pick, and anything in the 6th and 7th round, I think we'll all agree, are always not just developmental players, but kind of kick the tires players. I think if Jacob Rodriguez or Jake Golday, 2 linebackers, are on the board there, it's a matter of who do you have higher among that group of those 2 guys and maybe a couple of cornerbacks. I don't think there's another position group you even look at than those 2 with that 2nd round pick. I think what they did, I think the Kyle Duggar signing allows you to push safety to the 6th and 7th round. Now if Downs was on the board at 10 and they still had 10, I still think he would have been in play for them to take him. But now, okay, he's not on the board. You've done enough from a depth perspective. Get one more depth piece with one of those 2 6th round picks or one of those 2 7th round picks. So to me, Rounds 2 to 4 are linebacker, corner, and interior offensive linemen. More so probably a center who can play guard to get somebody in the pipeline. I mean, Ted Karras is 33. That can go like that. And right now, you have a practice squad guy on the roster as his backup in Jacob Bear, and you only have Jalen Rivers as a backup guard on the roster at the moment. So you need interior line depth in a significant way.
Yeah, I think interior line depth is probably their second or third priority in this draft because, obviously they addressed it to a large extent with Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers. But like you said, now with Matt Lee not on the roster anymore, you've got to have somebody that you trust behind Ted Karras if he goes down for any significant period of time, or you move someone currently on the roster, bump them over to Ted Karras's position. But I don't know. Skinny, do they maybe lean in that direction and say we'll just go with a Band-Aid there, or how do you think they'll approach that?
Yeah, I mean, in the mock I did last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I'm going to do another one on Thursday, a final one that'll publish on Thursday at local12.com. I took a kid named Brian Parker II. He's a center from Duke who can also play guard. But if you go to his NFL.com draft profile, they rate him as a guy who's eventually going to be a plus starter. And I think that's a perfect guy to put in the pipeline, a young guy that has center guard versatility and maybe as early as next year can slide into the starting spot, or if you can milk one more year out of Ted, you give him a little bit more time to develop. But it just felt like the perfect pick at the perfect time in the 4th round. So if you went linebacker, corner linebacker, and then somebody like this who's a center with guard versatility, I think you've addressed some depth needs that are pretty significant in my opinion. I think that's probably the route to go. I don't think you can go into this offseason with Jacob Bear, no offense to him, as your backup center. I'm forgetting the kid from Ohio State they had last year that had his Achilles injury.
Seth McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you. And they lost him early in the offseason. And maybe they were trying to stash him and hope that he was going to be their center of the future. But when he got snatched up by Detroit, and the waiving of Matt Lee, I think, surprised all of us just because of the timing of it. Came one day after Lucas Patrick, who might have filled that center guard depth role, was signed by the New York Giants. And so obviously they're planning on something here because, again, you're not going into the season with a 33-year-old center and no backup plan.
No, you can't. I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball, and a player that is generating a lot of buzz, at least here locally, is Jake Golday, the linebacker out of University of Cincinnati. What do you know about him? What do you like about him from what you've read about him? Because I'm sure you have done a lot of reading on him.
Yeah, just the energy he plays with. He can miss some tackles, but some of the missed tackles are because he's playing with so much energy that he thrusts himself into a lot of situations, and that's a good thing. That can be refined. That can be fixed. I will say, if you look at the linebacker class, man, if you don't get there's 3 guys with solid second-round grades: Golday, Jake Rodriguez, and C.J. Allen from Georgia. And if you read either Dane Brugler, The Athletic, or the NFL.com draft profiles of guys in the 3rd and 4th round at linebacker, they don't exactly wow you. Almost all of those has a chance to be a special teamer with a chance to be a backup. Well, okay, right. You do need some depth, but you also need somebody to compete with Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter for a starting spot. And I think Golday can do that. I think Rodriguez can do that. And C.J. Allen has a chance to do that. If you don't get one of those guys in round 2, that's the part to me where, as much as I would lean corner if Pons was on the board, I'm just afraid if you don't get one of those second-round guys, you're just hoping against hope that you get a guy that does develop as opposed to a guy who's more ready to play right away.
Before they traded away the number 10 overall pick, I think some people felt that if you got Mansour Delane or if you got Jermod McCoy, you could stick them outside and bump Dax Hill inside. That certainly was an option to do that. But what about now? Where are the Bengals likely to go? Are they going to try to draft a pure nickel corner to get that next, like you said earlier, that next Mike Hilton? Or are they going to try to get an outside guy, hope he develops, and then go just to start the season with a guy like Jalen Davis at the nickel?
Yeah, I think either or, but Pons is probably a pure slot guy. Brandon Cisse can play a little slot, but is probably more suited to the outside. I just think you get whatever corner you have graded the highest. I don't think you have to pigeonhole it. I would say this. I know it's a small sample size. It was probably the second half of the season where Dax really came on at outside corner, and with the whole part behind that has been that he finally settled in and finally kind of found a home, and that's why. Well, we'll see if that's the case. But the other part, Mike, let's not forget, I mean, this is the final year of the contracts for Dax Hill and DJ Turner. Not only do you need something for the present,
right,
but you probably need something in the pipeline, because I can't imagine you'll be able to extend both of them. You may not be able to extend either one of them. I would hope you have at least the concept of getting one of them done at a minimum. But you got to have something else in the pipeline. Josh Newton is nothing more than a backup player. DJ Ivy's nothing more than a backup player. Jalen Davis is a pure slot, and we don't know if he's a complete 17-game starting caliber guy. He did a nice job last year in the starts he got. Jasir Taylor you're kind of taking a flyer on him. He was once had a couple of good years, and he hasn't played a lot the last couple of years. So, yeah, I just think it's whatever the best corner is that you have on the board. If he's an outside guy, fine. If he's a pure slot, fine. Just whichever one you have rated the best.
Something we haven't talked about yet, and it, as everything seems to do with the Bengals, comes back to Joe Burrow. Bengals need to still consider restructuring the Joe Burrow contract because of something you mentioned to me yesterday. It was great that they acquired Dexter Lawrence, great that they extended him that third year that he may or may not ever see in 2028.
Yes.
Yes, for $28 million. The Bengals are right up against the cap. And as we know, the Bengals need cap space. Every NFL team needs cap space to sign their rookies, to get all of that done, to sign some straggling free agents, some undrafted free agents, what have you. They need some
practice squad.
Practice squad, correct. They need that extra cash on hand, on demand. Like, we all keep whatever X amount of dollars in our checkbook just in case the car breaks down or what have you. NFL teams are no different. They need that extra cash. So, do the Bengals revisit the idea of a contract restructure with Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean, it would seem to be something that's in play. I think the numbers I saw yesterday, they're like 1.6 or 7 mil under the salary cap. Now, they do catch, not a break, but they don't have to spend for the first round draft pick, so that does save them a little bit in signing draft picks, but they don't have enough cap space available to do the things we just talked about. They're probably $6 to $8 million away from that with not much buffer. I mean, it seems almost simplistic that TJ Slayton is going to get cut because he would save you between $6 and $7 million, and you've signed technically his replacement in Dexter Lawrence, traded for his replacement, Dexter Lawrence. Maybe you wait till after the draft to see how things shake out, and maybe a team doesn't get a nose tackle and still is searching for at least a starting caliber body, and maybe you can get a draft pick from them, or maybe you can do that on draft day, for goodness sake. So that's why he's probably still on the roster. But yeah, to your point of the restructuring Burrow, let's just say you don't get one of those linebackers, and you do have to wait, and you get more of a developmental player, and you realize, yeah, we need to go get a veteran of some kind after the draft's over with. Well, that's going to cost some money, and you need to have some of that cap space available. So I sure hope they do revisit it, because it just seems to make logical sense to give you that buffer that you need. I mean, I can't think of any other cap casualties you would have other than TJ Slayton that would give you significant savings, and that's probably not enough savings. I mean, there needs to be some more. So where does that come from?
So I'm going to throw a conspiracy theory out at you.
Sure.
And see how you react.
Love them.
Joe Burrow was waiting on the Bengals to do something before he entered any idea of restructuring his contract. And now the Bengals have done it. Do you think that's a possibility?
That's a good point. It is obviously a theory you're floating out there, but it would make some sense of, listen, you do a solid by fixing what I've asked you to fix, and I'll do you a solid by restructuring my deal. Again, if anybody hears this and thinks restructure means they're going to take money from Joe Burrow, no, they're just rearranging the dollars is all that means.
Correct.
So just keep in mind, I mean, this isn't Joe Burrow being benevolent and giving back $20 million, and nor should he.
No.
This is him getting actually more money up front in a signing bonus that they can prorate and kick the can down the road a little bit. So yeah, I don't think your theory's that far-fetched, Mike, at all. It would seem to make sense to me. Like, hey, I'm sure consider it, but if you don't do anything, well, I'm not doing you a solid. To heck with you guys. But now that they have, okay, tit for tat.
Okay. Right. And people might say, well, teams like the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes or whoever else, another typical Super Bowl contender, Philadelphia Eagles with some of their star players. Those players know that there is the cachet of Super Bowl success already in the bank. The Bengals don't come from that point of view and that perspective. And Joe Burrow knows this. And he's like, well, wait a minute. A lot has gone wrong in the last 3 years, and there have been a lot of holes on this roster that haven't been filled. You show me, you demonstrate to me that you're serious about filling those holes, and then absolutely we'll sit down and talk. And yes, I think everybody is well aware in this day and age, players are not charity cases. They're not giving up money. So, my team's so poor, they need some cash. No, they are restructuring it so that under the salary cap rules of the NFL, they can go out and sign the players that they needed to.
Yeah, I mean, the Patrick Mahomes example is a good one. I mean, it's become the running joke, right? Like every year, here comes the Patrick Mahomes restructuring again, so they can fiddle with the salary cap and fix the roster. Well, that Kansas City general manager coaching staff has gained the respect of that. Like Patrick knows, yeah, I'll restructure and you guys are going to do what's right with the money and get us players and make our team better. And so there is a trust factor that's been earned there. And so, yeah, I think now that they have done what they have done, I think that should earn some level of trust. Now, does it mean they're getting all of these things right? No, nobody knows that for sure. I mean, as we sit here today, I don't know if Boye Mafe plays to the analytics. I don't know to the point of, was last year step one of Dexter Lawrence going the other way in the performance scale, or was it just an outlier? So you don't know any of that stuff, but at least you've done the things that needed to be done, and I think that should earn some level of trust.
What were some of your other major takeaways from Monday? Because there was so much. Just a little inside baseball here. I get a little bit overwhelmed by a day like Monday where there is so much content. You start with the press conference of Dexter Lawrence at 10:30 or 10:40, and that ran a little bit late. He ran about 20 minutes late, whatever. He was working out, and no big deal there. But you get the defensive players on the first day of workouts, which was yesterday. You get the offensive players. Then you get Zach Taylor at 1. Then you get Al Golden at 1:20. There's a lot to take in there and a lot to digest. So with that as a backdrop, what were some of your biggest takeaways inside the locker room and from the press conferences?
Well, just the joy of the players knowing they've got a bona fide dude, right? I mean, and B.J. Hill especially, because they were once teammates and
birthday
still
B.J. Hill.
That's correct. And sometimes that joy, I don't want to say it's not genuine when you get a player like, yeah, we got a player, that's great. I'm glad this was genuine joy of getting this guy. And I think just Dexter himself, I mean, I don't really know much about him. I haven't really followed him in press conference settings or whatever from afar. I thought he was great, and I thought you could tell the joy that he had of coming here. I mean,
a relief that whole New York drama was in the past.
Yeah, the relief of that. And again, to his credit, because I phrased the question of, you're leaving a program that's rebuilding with a quarterback in Jackson Dart, and he quickly said, Jackson's my guy. He's going to be great, which I thought was really cool of him to say. But you're also leaving a situation where it is a total rebuild. And so do you want to be a part of that into your 30s, or do you want to be a part of a playoff team into your 30s? And I think he understands that he's a big part of that moving forward, but how can that not re-energize you? And he just seems to be an optimistic guy in general. I think Al Golden said, they went to dinner on Sunday night, some of the coaches and players and Dexter Lawrence, and he said you can just see his soul, how positive his soul is. I'm like,
yes.
That kind of, I didn't use that quote. I wish I had in the column I wrote, but that struck me as, wow. I mean, that sounds pretty deep and profound, but that kind of sounded right to me when he said it.
You know who sounded like a kid in a candy store yesterday? Amarius Mims.
I know, that was interesting to me.
It's like I met somebody who's my size, who actually, when I shook his hand was as big as mine, if not a little bit bigger. And I just found that whole dynamic very encouraging and very invigorating to the players. Like these players, a lot of the younger ones at least, seem like they're invigorated, they're happy, and it does give a new urgency, there's that word again, and focus to what they've got to get done in the offseason. And I thought it was a great question. One second. Great question by Paul Dehner Jr. of does a move like this re-energize and refocus what you have to do in the off season? And Zach thought that was a great question to ask. And he said there is some truth to that. There is absolutely truth to that.
Yeah, I'm more a tangible guy than I am an intangible guy for stuff like that. But to that point, I do think there is some truth to that this year. Like all these new pieces, man. If you're a veteran in that locker room, and you went through a season like you just went through, and let's just say they don't do anything. They did more than anything. But if they just did, how just depressing that would be. That like. We're going to go out here and try to do this again. No, I mean, you got a bunch of new parts that have to learn and maybe learn from you, and you have to teach them during these OTAs. And I think that can be engaging, and I do think it does add a little bit more juice to the offseason. Because let's face it, who wants to go out and play 11-on-0 on grass for 2 months, right? I mean, right. It can be drudgery. I mean, you're doing a bunch of installs, and there's no real football being done. But now it's, hey, we got some new parts here. We can do some maybe new things on defense, and let's see how this all works out. Let's see how this fits. Let's see what his strength is. And I do think there was some truth to that, and it was a good question, and I thought Zach's answer was a good answer to that, because I think, again, I'm more, what can you do tangibly? I don't need Harry high school rah-rah stuff. I really don't at the professional level, but right. I do think that there is some positive juice that comes with moves like this, especially this move.
It'll be fascinating to see how the veterans on this team are onboarded into the You always have new veterans coming on to a team because of free agency, this era of free agency in the NFL. But with the Bengals, it's not just new veterans on the team. It's veterans expected to come in and contribute at a very high level. That's what makes this offseason a lot different for the Cincinnati Bengals. Draft night is Thursday night, and then we have draft night day number 2, rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, and then rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday. Tell us about your coverage on Local 12 and local12.com, Skinny.
Yep, I've been doing the positional draft preview since last Monday. In fact, I'm putting the last main position group up today, the secondary, and looking at that at corner and safety. And tomorrow I'll do the specialists. They're not in the market for any of the specialists, but I just need to round it out with that. And then I'll have a mock draft on local12.com early on Thursday. And then we get to sit there, Mike, and watch the draft and probably not have to write anything on Thursday night, right? That's going to feel odd, just kind of sitting there. And we all work really hard during the draft. I don't want anybody to feel sorry for us because we're covering sports for a living, all that. But the draft weekend it's a grind. There's no question. It feels like Thursday night starts and you wake up and it's suddenly Sunday morning and it's just a blur what took place because of just how much it is. But it's one of my favorite times of the year because those of us in the room, the media gathered, we get along pretty well as a group, and this is a fun time to crack jokes and be cynical and have fun with it. So I as much as it is a lot of work, I also really do enjoy the time with everybody in that draft weekend. And then about 9:30 or 10 o'clock on Saturday night, we get to go have the best beer of the year because all the work at that point is behind us. So yeah, I'll have daily coverage, obviously a profile of each of the draft picks shortly after they're done. I'll have an analysis after Friday night, an analysis, full analysis after the draft concludes on Saturday with a grade for each player and an overall grade as well. I'll also have a video, vertical video, just kind of recapping the draft on Friday. Yanni Trigelis and I will do kind of a mini podcast, if you will, after the draft on Friday. And you and I will come back Sunday or Monday and recap it ourselves.
We will do that, and I look forward to doing that with all of my body, mind, and spirit in one piece. How's that, Skinny?
It'll be sucked out of us by about that time probably, but we'll get back to it.
Somehow we will all get re-energized. So make sure you follow not only Skinny on local12.com, but be sure to follow my coverage. There's a column recapping yesterday's news of Dexter Lawrence speaking and the player reaction and what it means going forward for these 2026 Bengals. That's up on CLNS Cincy with a Y.com. Of course, all of the locker room and press conference reaction, that's up on the Jungle Roar podcast page at youtube.com/@JungleRoarPod, as well as lots of other great videos and interviews up on my X page at Trags, Trags. Be sure to follow Skinny at Local12 Skinny on the X. Want to thank our great sponsor, as always, Prize Picks, and our great folks at CLNS Media. Until next week, you know the deal. Keep that jungle roaring.